If you grew up in California in the 1970s, there was a building you knew better than almost any other. Not a school, not a church, not a neighbor's house. A store. It sat on the edge of a parking lot that seemed to go on forever. The sign was red and white and blue, simple, confident, unmistakable. The doors slid open automatically, which still felt like something close to magic in 1974. And the moment you stepped inside, you were somewhere. What Kmart was like in 1970s California. There was one sound that could stop an entire store in its tracks. By the time we're done here, you'll know exactly what that sound meant and why it worked the way it did on every single person who heard it. But first, you have to understand what California was in the 1970s. Because Kmart didn't just open stores here, it read the state like a map. California in the early 1970s was the fastest growing state in the nation. People were arriving from everywhere, the Midwest, the South, Texas, the East Coast, chasing the California promise. Good weather, good jobs, a new house on a new street in a city that hadn't fully existed 10 years earlier. These were not wealthy families. They were working families, young families, families who needed everything: furniture, clothes, school supplies, hardware, toys, all at once, all on a budget that didn't have a lot of room for error. And Kmart had been watching. There's a reason Kmart chose California the way it did, and the answer has almost nothing to do with shopping. It has everything to do with what California families needed to feel. Before there was a science called retail psychology, Kmart was already practicing it. You just didn't know you were being studied. Every Kmart built in California during the 1970s followed the same basic floor plan, and that wasn't an accident. It was architecture designed for a specific psychological purpose, to make you feel oriented, comfortable, and in control of your own choices the moment you walked through the door. The main aisle, which Kmart employees called the action alley, ran directly down the center of the store from the entrance to the back wall. Wide, clear, easily navigated by a mother pushing a cart with one hand and holding a child's hand with the other. It was generous space, and generosity in a shopping environment communicates something to the brain even when the conscious mind isn't listening. It says, "You belong here." The floors were hard linoleum tile, easy to clean, easy to maintain, and crucially, easy to hear. The sound of footsteps on those tiles, the distant rattle of a shopping cart, the echo of voices, all of it produced a particular acoustic quality. The store felt alive, populated. Even on a slow Tuesday afternoon, the sound told you other people are here. Other families are making these same choices. You're not doing anything unusual. You're doing exactly what everyone does. That sound was community. Spread throughout the store were the spinning rack displays, the wire racks that held everything from greeting cards to sunglasses to thread to reading glasses. These racks were deliberately placed at eye level and positioned at the ends of aisles where your attention naturally traveled. They were not random. Each rack placement had been studied against traffic patterns in stores across the country. What the racks did, functionally, was give you something to do with your hands, something to browse. Shopping, Kmart understood before most of its competitors, is not primarily about buying. It's about looking. The act of browsing, picking something up, turning it over, putting it back, produces a low-level pleasure response. Kmart's engineers designed a store that maximized the number of opportunities for that response to occur. You thought you were shopping. You were actually being gently guided through a carefully designed experience. And then there was the smell. If you spent any time in a California Kmart in the 1970s, you know exactly what I mean. It was a specific smell, faintly industrial, with something warm underneath it. Part new plastic, part popcorn drifting from the snack bar, part whatever they used to clean those tile floors, part the particular scent of fabric stacked in cotton bolts in the dry goods section. It was not a beautiful smell, it was not a luxurious smell, but it was Kmart's smell. And the moment your brain registered it, something settled in you. You knew where you were, you knew how this worked, you knew what to do next. Smell is the sense most directly connected to memory. Every Kmart smelled more or less the same, which means that smell was also, without anyone explicitly designing it this way, a form of brand identity. Walk into any Kmart in California, from the San Fernando Valley to Fresno to the suburbs east of Sacramento, and within seconds, your nervous system recognized the environment. You were home. Not metaphorically, neurologically. "Attention, Kmart shoppers." There was a voice. It came through speakers mounted in the ceiling tiles. Not great speakers, not hi-fi, just the flat, slightly buzzy sound of a 1970s public address system. And most of the time you barely heard it. The store's ambient noise absorbed it. Kids were asking questions, carts were rolling, Muzak was playing somewhere. But some voices you heard differently. "Attention, Kmart shoppers, we have a blue light special on aisle 7. And something happened that had no real equivalent in retail history. People stopped, mid-sentence, mid-step, mid-thought. The entire ambient flow of the store reorganized itself around a single rotating light on a chrome pole. Shoppers moved, not all of them, but enough that you could see it, a subtle gravitational pull toward aisle 7 or wherever the light was, and the product on that aisle, maybe it was pillowcases, maybe it was dish soap, maybe it was a blouse in 3 colors, suddenly had a value that it had not possessed 30 seconds earlier. Not because the product had changed, because the announcement had changed the way people perceived it. That is not a sales technique, that is social psychology. And Kmart used it several times a day, every day, in every store in California. Here is what the blue light special actually engineered. First, it created scarcity. The announcement was always for a limited time. This was not a sale you could come back for tomorrow. You had to decide now. That urgency was not accidental, it was the mechanism. Second, it created shared experience. Everyone in the store heard the same announcement at the same moment. A woman shopping alone in the housewares aisle, and a man in hardware, and a teenager in records, they all heard it at the same time. For 30 seconds, they were all thinking about the same thing. The store became briefly, genuinely communal. Third, and this is the part that almost no retail historian talks about, it was entertainment. The blue light special was not just a discount mechanism, it was something that happened in the store. It broke the monotony of shopping. It gave the trip a small element of unpredictability, of potential reward. You might get lucky today. You might happen to be near the right aisle at the right time and get something good for less than you expected to pay for it. That possibility, even when it didn't pay off, made the whole visit feel like more than an errand. It made Kmart feel like a place where things happened. If the sound of that announcement was the heartbeat of the store, the thing that gave it rhythm and anticipation, then the smell that drifted from the far corner of the building was something else entirely. That was the snack bar. Every 1970s California Kmart had one. It sat near the entrance, usually to the right, close enough that you hit the smell within 30 seconds of walking through the door. Hot dogs turning slowly on a stainless steel rotisserie. Popcorn in a machine that had been running since the store opened. Slushies in 4 colors behind a curved plastic display. The prices were almost nothing. A hot dog for 35 cents, popcorn in a wax paper bag, a slushie in a paper cup with a domed plastic lid and a straw. and yet the snack bar was doing something the rest of the store was not. It was turning a shopping trip into an occasion. Think about what shopping meant in working-class California in 1973. It was not recreation. It was a task, necessary, sometimes stressful, definitely budgeted. You went because the kids needed school clothes, or the dish rack broke, or you were out of towels. You went because you had to. But if you stopped at the snack bar before you started, if you got the kids a slushie and a bag of popcorn, the trip became something different. It became a treat, a small, affordable ritual that communicated to your children, this is something we do together, and it is good. That was not nothing. For families stretched thin by California's cost of living in the 1970s, even a California still affordable by today's standards was a stretch for a family of 5 on one income. That 35-cent hot dog was a form of abundance. You could give your kids something, you could treat them, and you could do it at a cost that fit inside a budget that otherwise didn't have room for extras. The snack bar also solved a practical problem that Kmart's designers understood well. Shopping with children is hard. It is tiring. Attention spans collapse. The snack bar gave children something to hold, something to taste, something to focus on, which brought the adults roughly 20 additional minutes of productive shopping time. Whether that was deliberate engineering or happy accident, it produced the same result. Families stayed longer, and families that stayed longer spent more. But what those families remembered, what their children remembered, was not the efficiency calculation. They remembered the slushie, the color of it, the cold of the cup, the way the straw made a particular sound at the bottom when it was almost gone. Memory doesn't store transactions, it stores sensations, and Kmart, probably without fully understanding why, was very good at creating sensations worth keeping. In the back of every California Kmart, past the hardware, past the toy aisle, past the garden supplies near the rear entrance, there was a counter that most retail historians have almost entirely ignored, the layaway counter. Layaway is simple enough to explain. You pick out something you want, you bring it to the counter, they hold it in the back. You come back every week or every 2 weeks and make a payment. When the item is paid for in full, you take it home. No credit check, no interest, no debt, just time and discipline and showing up. For California families in the 1970s who did not have or did not trust credit cards, layaway was not a convenience, it was the mechanism by which Christmas happened. It was how a child got a bicycle in December when the money to pay for it in October didn't exist yet. It was how a family furnished a living room piece by piece, how a mother bought school clothes in August for September. You would drive to the Kmart, maybe once a week, maybe every other week, make your payment at that counter, get your updated receipt, and drive home. No purchase, nothing to show for it, just a piece of paper and the knowledge that the thing was still there, still waiting. That act of returning, week after week, created a relationship with the store that no single transaction could replicate. It made Kmart part of the household's financial rhythms, part of how the family planned and measured and worked toward things. The layaway counter was, functionally, a savings account with a product at the end of it, and Kmart was the bank. What it produced, in the language of retail strategy, was loyalty so deep it didn't feel like loyalty. It felt like habit, like a relationship, like the place was yours in some way that had nothing to do with ownership. You'd brought your receipts here. You'd made your payments here. The woman behind that counter, and it was almost always a woman, had seen you enough times to recognize you, had maybe exchanged a few words about the weather, about whether the item you were paying on was a birthday gift or a Christmas gift. That was Kmart's most invisible architecture of all. Not the floors, not the aisle layout, not the blue light special. It was a relationship built one small payment at a time. And then something changed. Not all at once, never all at once. Institutions don't fall that way. They erode, corner by corner, season by season, until one day you walk through the doors and the thing you remember isn't quite there anymore, and you can't identify the exact moment it left. 3 forces came for the California Kmart, and the cruel thing about all 3 is that they were set in motion at different times by different hands for different reasons, and they converged anyway. The first force, Kmart's own decisions. Through the mid-1970s, Kmart expanded aggressively across California. They opened stores in every suburb, every new development, every community that was reaching the population threshold that justified a big-box footprint. This was, by every measurable metric, a success. More stores meant more revenue. More revenue meant more stores. But expansion carries a hidden cost that rarely appears in quarterly reports. When you open everywhere, you stop being somewhere specific. The Kmart that felt like your Kmart, the one near the neighborhood you grew up in, the one where the woman at the layaway counter knew your name, gradually became interchangeable with every other Kmart in the chain. And interchangeable is the enemy of the emotional architecture that had made the stores work. Kmart's corporate decisions through the late 1970s also reflected a company that had stopped listening to what its stores were actually doing for people. The engineering that had made the floors generous and the aisle layout intuitive began to be compromised by pressure to fit more merchandise into the same footprint. The snack bars, which had never been major revenue generators, started to be evaluated as liabilities rather than community anchors. The invisible architecture was being dismantled by the people who built it, not intentionally, just carelessly. The second force, Walmart. Walmart had been watching Kmart the same way Kmart had once watched California. By the late 1970s and into the early 1980s, Walmart was beginning its westward march, methodically, strategically, with a logistics and inventory infrastructure that Kmart had never bothered to build. While Kmart was running its stores on systems that were already showing their age, Walmart was investing in the technology that would eventually make it possible to know in real time exactly what was selling in every store in the country. Kmart knew what it had sold last week. Walmart was building the capacity to know what it was going to sell next week. That difference, invisible to any shopper, invisible to most employees, was the difference between a company that could adapt to California's shifting communities and a company that couldn't. When Walmart arrived in California, it did not take Kmart's customers by being dramatically better. It took them by being consistently good enough, with slightly cleaner stores, slightly better stocked shelves, slightly lower prices on the things that mattered. Slightly is everything when loyalty is the only thing you have left. The third force, the strip mall itself. The California strip mall, the exact form that had made Kmart possible and powerful, began to age in ways that the stores anchoring it could not reverse. The families who had moved into those new suburbs in 1972 were not the same families in 1982. Their children had grown, their needs had changed, and the commercial logic of the strip mall, built for a specific moment in suburban expansion, did not age gracefully into the next decade's California. New development patterns, the enclosed mall, the power center, the emerging big box formats built on larger land parcels farther from established neighborhoods, began to draw the same retail dollars in different directions. The parking lot that had felt expansive in 1973 started to feel cramped when measured against a new competitor's vast asphalt landscape. The Kmart had always been dependent on its location, and its location, that particular strip mall on that particular arterial road in that particular community, had been its strength and its cage at the same time. Here's what those stores actually were. Not discount retail, not a shopping destination, not a brand. They were a system, a carefully engineered set of decisions about space and sound and smell and price, designed to make ordinary California families feel that ordinary life was worth something. The floor layout told you, you belong here. The snack bar told you, this can be a small joy. The blue light special told you, something good might happen today. The layaway counter told you, you can have the thing you want if you're willing to work toward it. None of those messages were spoken. None of them were in an advertisement. They were embedded in the architecture itself, invisible, constant, and strangely powerful. That is what the people who designed those stores understood that most retailers didn't. People don't shop for products. They shop for feelings, for belonging, for the quiet reassurance that they're doing fine, that the family is going to be okay, that there's enough. The Kmart stores are almost entirely gone now. A few dozen remain scattered across the country, a fraction of what once covered California like a grid. But the families that moved through those aisles, the children who held those cold paper slushy cups, the mothers who made those layaway payments, the fathers who heard that blue light special announcement and turned their cart around, they remember. Not because the store was extraordinary, because it was exactly ordinary, in the best possible way. If you shopped in a California Kmart in the 1970s, we want to know exactly where. Tell us the city. Tell us what you remember most. The parking lot, the smell, the snack bar, the blue light special. Leave it in the comments below. We read every single one. And if this took you back, if something in those tile floors or that snack bar smell felt like a memory you hadn't thought about in years, there's more here. We've been building an archive of American life before everything changed. The places, the sounds, the invisible systems that shaped how a generation grew up. Every video on this channel is a piece of that archive. Stay as long as you like.